Hello and welcome to this demo for Dynamics Field Service Resource Scheduling Optimization. Once you've installed RSO, the solution that is implemented makes a couple small changes within your Dynamics system, but overall the actual logic of RSO comes from outside. So there's an agent on a different server essentially accessing your system through a technical user and making the changes. So we'll take a look at all of those, but we'll start with the actual new app that you're given. So you can see I'm now in the Resource Scheduling Optimization app, and it is quite slimmed down from the normal apps. So all we have is a regular schedule board, and then I'll start the demo here on the optimization schedule, since this is given out of the box as an example of how to optimize your schedule. So if we open these, we have two main portions, which is the scope and the goal. They are both mandatory fields, and we are given 3 of these each out of the box. So the scope determines which resources and which resource requirements are actually taken. We'll take a look at these first. So for the resources, we have a drop-down list of all the views and thereby filters for resources. And the default here is the sample resources view for optimization, which only filters by a new flag on bookable resources, which is basically optimize yes or no. So with these resources in mind, we can look at the requirements view, which is another view selector, and each requirement, so from the work order, it generates a requirement, and that requirement has a new flag on it, optimize yes or no. So this is essentially just a filter for these that are flagged for optimization. And beyond that, we don't really have to worry about anything else except for these booking statuses, which determine what should happen with a certain status. So as you can imagine, if the technician is already on their way to a booking or whatever status you have to find for yourself in the resource scheduling optimization or in field service, it might not be a good idea to optimize those and change them again. I mean, optimizing just means to potentially change. But what I have done for the purpose of this demo is whenever something is scheduled, I have changed it to optimize, while the default is actually to ignore those, because I want to be able to show that in this demo, and I figured it's best to even reschedule stuff that is already scheduled. You would probably not want that for yourself, because obviously customers might get another email and so on. Appointments that are scheduled might actually be deleted from today's schedule, so it's likely more inconvenient, but for the purpose of this demo, I'll leave it in. Going back, the next is the goal, which in this case, it's maximize productivity. The other two that are given is to prioritize emergencies or to minimize the travel duration. I just went along with the default, maximize productivity. Optionally, so we could also take the historical traffic or without. So that would be the main priority with the other optimization goal. That would then take travel time as the main priority. In this case, I've just set it to be as soon as possible and to minimize the total travel time. So yes, but that's basically only at the second stage. Now, something that is quite interesting for me is the engine effort level, which goes from very light to very intense. The amount of computation, the amount of effort taken to actually find the optimal result. So if you take very light, that might be preferable if you want to run it very often. Then that would mean it just searches for something in the schedule that matches your criteria. If you have an afternoon off, it might just give you anything that you can reach in that time and that you can fulfill in that time. It doesn't necessarily take big efforts to find the best thing you could do with that time, the most efficient thing. The opposite of that would be very intense, where it really completes the traveling salesman problem, calculates all the possible options, all the possible routes, and actually finds the very best. But of course, that could take a while. And just as an example, if I have 3 resources and 3 requirements to schedule, then even on my intense, so not the highest scale, it takes approximately 3 or 4 minutes to calculate that. So that's actually pretty slow in my opinion. I'll get back to that in a moment. That's back on the optimization schedule settings. I'll stay here for a moment and talk about the constraints. So we've already talked about travel time a bit, and you can see it's also in this list. There are other constraints though. So if we look at this multi-select option set, I have a couple other options. Whenever I select something here, it adds another entry to the objectives list, and I can then also prioritize them. So I don't just have the option of selecting constraints, but I can also organize their importance. First one is fairly self-explanatory, schedule within working hours. So if I have set up my resource calendar and have defined my work times, then it will not do anything outside that. I will show you in a moment though how to actually bypass that. So I could also always say the resource is expected or allowed to travel before their working time starts, just as an example, or afterwards. So now the next two are familiar for field service users, characteristics and roles. So I need the correct certification and the correct roles in order to perform a certain task or to have a matching resource. The next two, scheduling lock options and scheduling windows, are both essentially the same functionality. Scheduling lock options is the old version of scheduling windows. That just means if the work order has a certain time and date associated with it, then this will respect that. So I will not send a technician earlier or later than the promised time. The next would be the resource preference. On the work order, if a certain resource is preferred, then that is now preferred as well, and no one else is sent. Next is the territories. I'm not sent somewhere else. That is not my territory. Obviously, the territories are just a tag. Probably best to give you resources more than their one territory if you want them to potentially go into neighboring territories, but you can also turn it off here. You could potentially have a on-demand scheduling optimization goal that ignores territories for emergencies if you really need someone to just do it, even if they have to travel further than normal. And finally, match resource type. You might not want a subcontractor. You might not want a piece of equipment to be sent alone without a technician. So that's just your resource type. You want to send a user, for example. Having said that, I will leave all of these as they are for the live demo in a moment. We'll just come back to the final setting, which is the schedule. The out of the box is 4 hours after job completion. That just means it might run for 5 minutes, and then after 4 hours, it will run again. So you can even see in my schedule here that it slowly progresses throughout the day. Here we are at midnight, and then here we are at 1 in the morning. So it will just progress slightly throughout the day. I can make that expire as well if I want to. So this will expire in a couple days. It even tells me when the next run will be. For the purposes of this demo, I have left it at 4 hours. I could go up to a minute or down to every several days. That's obviously up to you. If I'm just here testing the schedule, then I can also run it now. Let's skip to the schedule board for a bit of a live demo. I have an empty schedule board for the purposes of this demo with a couple of requirements at the bottom. On my schedule board, I'm given a new button, optimization, a small puzzle piece on the top right, where I now have the option of optimizing the schedule manually or starting the resource scheduling optimization manually. I can either do it for all the resources in the current view or for a single resource, which I'll do for the purposes of this demo because it's faster. It only takes a couple minutes and not 3 times as much. I will just say the resource, the rest of today, and what differentiates this tool here from just right-clicking my resource is that I have the option of selecting the goal. So I could minimize the travel time, I could prioritize emergencies, and I can then also simulate, which if I just click optimize schedule on my resource, it will just highlight the rest of today, and you can see it highlights from now until midnight and calculates what possible work orders, so resource requirements, I can fulfill in that time. On the top right, we also see the current progress, and this will soon change into an overview of what just happened. So it will tell me how many resource requirements it has booked, or how many bookings it has changed, or maybe if it's the end of the day and my schedule was behind or otherwise failed me, then it might have actually deleted things. No bookings were deleted, no bookings were updated, but 2 were created. We can close this, and if we zoom in a bit and refresh the page, we can see that 2 bookings were added. This one here is at my resources address. The other one is 23 minutes away by car. So we can see that it found these 2, removed them from my schedule board automatically. And of course, this could have happened automatically if I set up the schedule to run more frequently. Earlier, I said that we have new options on the bookable resource. So I'll show you those in a moment. If we right-click the resource, we can view the resource card and click on the name. That's my preferred way of getting there. We could of course also go through the bookable resources list. We have new options. Let's start with the tab resource scheduling optimization first. This is where I can say that this resource should be optimized, and changing this from a no, which would be the default, to a yes makes the resource appear on the scheduling optimization view. The one other that I find most important for resource scheduling optimization is this tab, where we are given a new option here of schedule outside work orders, which I mentioned earlier, where I can say allow travel before or after work hours, and this of course frees up a lot of space, but might just not be realistic, so I could easily book a 5-hour trip before work, which is probably not ideal, let's be honest. So let me know if you want to see anything else, otherwise I'll end this demo here, and I wish you a pleasant day, and until my next video. See you soon.